Welcome back to another edition of the Boundary Breakers Collective. And today I am super stoked to have Gabrielle Pelicci with me. Dr. Gabby completed her doctoral work in transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies with a dissertation on women healers and studied plant medicine with indigenous healers in New Mexico and Guatemala. She has been a university professor of integrative and holistic medicine since 2007, and she was named one of the top 100 women of the future in 2022. And her first book, All This Healing is Killing Me, is a number one Amazon bestseller. Dr. Gabby, welcome. I'm so
Th-
honored to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and to be connecting across the continents from America to Spain. It's so nice to have this conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I start my interviews always with the same question, which might be a little bit boring, but the thing is that the answer is different every time. So, why do you consider yourself a boundary breaker?
I think that I make choices that are brave, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that making those choices often disrupts things. It disrupts the norm in my family, in my community, and it changes perspective. I didn't choose to be that way. It was just a natural way that I was
Okay.
born.
You think it was genetically induced or?
I don't know. I always found that the constraints of the stories and the norms and the rules, I had difficulty following them if they didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
If it resonated as something that was true for me, then it was easy to follow. And if it seemed like unhealthy or unjust or um, dishonest or something, I just had difficulty conforming.
Hmm.
So I was just naturally authentic. And sometimes that goes against the norm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you would think that a lot of us ask the question, why are we doing this? Or why are we still doing this? Or is this still serving us? And that is basically creating that awareness about what is going on around us and with us. And yet I see so many people not doing that. I see so many people in that rat race and really digged into the system, into what governments and corporates and social media and media are dictating. And it's, you could say I didn't choose to be like that. I was like born like that. But do you think that we can develop that awareness and develop that curiosity and develop that sense of asking the why?
I think if we have role models and allies and support, we can. I see that people stay in the status quo because they don't know what the alternative is. And once
Mhm.
they have an experience of the alternative and the support to pursue the alternative, they often go that way. But that path can be really challenging. So I have another book that's coming out actually tomorrow. It's called The Last Ceremony. And
Oh,
in this,
congratulations.
thanks. It's my second book that's coming out, and it's a story about how I left a lot of my work stuff and I went to live on properties where I could participate in agriculture and permaculture and building homes and growing food and things like that. And experience alternative lifestyles, living off the grid and not being involved in the rat race, as you say. And I think sometimes we have a utopia vision of what that other lifestyle is, but you can't participate in that other lifestyle if you don't have community, if you don't have resources, if you don't have a vision of what you're creating. You can't
Mhm.
just leave society. Like there needs to be an alternative that we're creating. And I saw that both options are challenging. It's challenging to be in a 9 to 5 and pay your bills and live in society. And it's also challenging to leave
Mhm.
and to live off the grid and to be more holistic. I think for me, I try to pick ones that are most in alignment with my values, and I do my best to try to stay in alignment with those values. But I'm imperfect like everybody else. It's a journey you have to explore and discover as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And especially living a life that is in alignment with your values and with your vision on the world. And that is something also that I feel that we do not enough exploration there. Like, what are our values? What is our truth? What is the world and the reality that we want to live in? Because to me, we are creating our own reality, and we can choose that reality, and everything that we do and where we are and how we are is the result of choices that we have made. The thing is that a lot of those choices are made, I would say, unconsciously, because you're just in that system. There's so many people that are just doing whatever is expected from them, and it's studying and then go to work and work very hard and go on that career ladder and then retire, and that's it. There's only this linear way, and everybody knows that's actually not true. But there's very few people that are exploring these alternatives, because it takes, like you say, it takes bravery, it takes courage, it takes sometimes also confrontation with people that love us and that we love and that mean, but that have another vision, that are projecting their fears on us. And so a lot of us choose for this standard life, and then one moment in time feel depleted or not fulfilled, and say, okay, what is this? And there's this quote: it is better at the end of your life, here on earth in this vessel, it is better to say, I am very happy with everything that I did, than to have to say, I regret all the things I didn't do.
Yeah.
And yet I think a lot of us speak that last sentence, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for people that are listening or watching here, what would be like something that they could start doing or considering in order to break a little bit free from these boundaries?
Yeah, so I practice writing as my practice. I mean, I do the yoga and the meditation and all the holistic things. I'm trained as a holistic health professor. I did my dissertation research about women healers, been teaching that for many years, but currently my main practice is writing and supporting other people with their writing. And what I discovered in my books, I wrote two memoirs in the last 2 years. So I wrote 500 pages about my life. And when I did that,
Wow.
I
I'll make sure
discovered
that the link to that is here also in the show notes for people that want to find out more, because in like our 40 minutes, we cannot possibly cover
I
everything.
know.
It's
I know.
available. That's a very good tip. Yeah.
What I discovered was I saw the patterns of my own choices that you
Mhm.
mentioned. I saw what I was creating in my own life. And I saw the opportunities and the places where I could forgive, where I could do things differently, where I could write a new story. And so I take other people through that practice as well. And what I see is if you're just even spending a little bit of time, it creates that opening that you're describing, a little bit of reflection, a little bit of self-awareness, right? And when you start to open just a little, you start to see new possibilities that you didn't see before. So that's the main practice that I use for my own life and for my clients that I work with. I think that there's many practices and different things that you can do to create that opening, but that's the one that I use.
Yeah, beautiful. And when you say creating or writing new stories, do you mean rewriting the old stories, the versions that you have in your head or in your heart? Or do you mean writing stories about your future, about what you want to manifest? Or both?
Both, yeah. So, what happens when you write your story down and you see the version that you carry in your head? You have a moment of confrontation where you recognize that some of the stories that you're carrying in your head are not so true.
Yeah.
Because it's easy until you look it down and you witness and you have other people witnessing it, it's easy to ignore or to blame. Oh, it's everyone else's fault and I'm the victim. You can do a lot of things if it's just in your own mind. But when you put it down and you have that witnessing, you're like, oh, these are the places where I disappointed, or these are the places where I failed. And that's an important part of the recognition of
Mhm.
what's available to you going forward. Because if you don't acknowledge in your own story what's actually true, without that radical honesty, it's very difficult to then create something new for yourself going forward. What happened for me after I wrote all of this was that life changed on its own. I didn't even really need to practice the manifestation and the visualization and make the vision. I didn't really even need to do any of those things because the writing was transformative. And as I transformed, I was showing up differently. And as I was showing up differently, everything around me started changing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to create the change. I was the change. And then life responded to me on the other side.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's a practice that I also do, and I also do it with my clients. It's like rewriting these old stories in order to make
Mhm.
them like more neutral, more balanced versions of a reality. And it is also about responsibility because of a lot of us see ourselves as victims of situations where you could say as such you are sometimes a victim, and there are a lot of people, especially women, that have trauma, but we are not our trauma. And it doesn't mean that we cannot step out of that and change or look at it. And a lot of us also consider that if we are a victim or if we have failed in something, that it's like we are the failure. It's like they impersonate the event that didn't work or the relationship that didn't work. And if you can step away from that and understand that you are not the failure and you are not the victim and you are not what you think and you are not what you feel, but you are basically a human being that has a lot of capacity and potential, then you are like liberating yourself from a lot of weight, and you have a lot more possibilities and options to, like you say, to create your next step and to recreate your complete story. I think that's a very powerful thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, beautiful. But so this, the power of storytelling is also being vulnerable, right? And that's also something that we are a bit reluctant to do, especially I work a lot with women professionals, executives, and entrepreneurs, high achievers. So being vulnerable and talking about what doesn't work, talking about what makes you feel uncomfortable, talking about the not knowing, talking about paradoxes that you try to embrace, but that's so difficult. It is a vulnerability that very few people want to show. So how was it for you to do
Terrible.
that?
Terrible. It was
Terrible.
awful.
Tell me
It was
more.
awful. Yeah, it was terrible. I said in one podcast interview last year that I put everything in my first book that I didn't want you to know about me. I put everything
Oh,
in there that I didn't want you to know about me. And what I experienced on the other side of that was a liberation. It was like we spend so much energy with our mask on and presenting a version of ourselves to the world that's not 100% true. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a
yeah.
lot of work to be smiling all the time and to be perfect and to be like that all the time. And so when I put all the things in the book, two things happen. One, I like set myself free because these are all the mistakes I made. This is all the stuff you don't know about me. And the second
It's
thing that
enough, but I don't have
happened,
to hide it
yeah,
anymore.
yeah. The second thing that happened is that the response, there was so much love and so much validation and so much appreciation, just a flood of gratitude. Like
Mm.
women telling me, I've listened to your book 10 times. Like it's healing me just to listen to you, right? There was such a flood of gratitude that it made the whole thing worthwhile. And then it also became a catalyst for helping other people to do the same. But it was terrible. The whole thing was terrible. Writing it all down, being witnessed in it, owning it, accepting it, and then finding serenity that doesn't happen in one day or even 1 month. That takes time. It's
Mm.
worth it because you're a different person on the other side, and all of the things that you're looking for, the sense of wholeness, the sense of serenity, being really comfortable in your own skin, liking yourself, all of that is available to you, but you have to take the journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It is about self-love, isn't it? It is about also
Yeah.
self-forgiveness, about embracing your shadow sides, which is something that in a very judgmental society, it's a very difficult thing to do. And I believe that we are our worst judges. Like you say, when you receive so much kindness and gratitude from other people, it's something that we are not always capable to give to ourselves. Yeah, we can give that to others, but to give it to ourselves, it's like straight, which is a little bit absurd, right? To not to give it to the most important person in the world, which is you, because you are the one that when you are in your strength, you can also give and serve other people a lot better than if you have to keep up that mask. And yeah, I understand.
I think one of the reasons that we struggle with the self-love is because we're out of integrity and we have a relationship with ourself. And so one of the things that happened after I moved through this experience is that I was in integrity with myself, right? I was in integrity with my values. I was being my most honest, authentic version of me. And once I did that, it was easier to appreciate and love myself because I was in good, right relationship with myself. Before that, I wasn't really in right relationship with myself. I was very unconscious, putting myself in the same terrible situations over and over again. And it was like, you're not going to love that person that is setting you up for all these. It's very difficult if you're not in right relationship with self to practice self-love because it doesn't feel real. It feels like you're forcing yourself to like yourself as opposed to restoring that relationship. And then it feels easy to have self appreciation. It's easy now. Now it's not like I have to look in the mirror and say, I love you, Gabrielle. I don't have to create some kind of ritual because it's just a natural experience.
Yeah. Where do you think it comes from that it is so difficult to love and accept ourselves? Where did
I
that
think it comes in that separation. I think we came out appreciating and loving ourselves and everything around us. And then I think we're conditioned to adapt to social norms, which I think in a lot of ways is appropriate. I don't think that all social norms need to be abandoned, but we are conditioned to conform to social norms and to please our parents and to please our teachers and our partners. And we start to create that separation. And in that separation, we get a disconnect from ourselves because we're no longer just acting on our own impulses, our own intuition, our own desires. We're now trying to please other people and we're now trying to achieve other things. And I think it's that separation. And so I think it's about coming back to self and coming back. I think you can have a relationship to self that is solid and healthy, and you can still exist in the world serving others and accomplishing your dreams. And is there going to be some difficult conversations with the people around you? Yeah, maybe. But I also think that if you develop that resilience, that those conversations, you can hold them in compassion. You can hear the other person's perspective. You can practice empathy. I think there's ways to navigate this. I don't think we're taught how to do any of these things. I think it's something that you have to seek out and find on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about boundaries, here we're talking about setting boundaries, not breaking
Yeah.
boundaries, setting them, which is also
Yeah.
something that I see a lot of women have an issue with setting boundaries. Make sure that they really know what is important and relevant to them, and they have a language around that, and they can express that in a way that is authentic, but also
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I love that story. I believe that, but I still want to go back to when you say it was terrible because that's a feeling, right?
The
That's
name of my first book is All This Healing is Killing Me. That's the name of the first
yeah.
book, right?
Mm,
So the journey that I was on was one of knowing that I was having I had a lot of trauma when I was young. I grew up in a home with domestic violence, mental illness, addiction. My mother died when I was young. And so I was carrying a lot of trauma with me. And I went on a journey for 20 years of how to heal the trauma. And I tried every modality and every therapy and every practice. And I traveled to different countries. And I was my whole life just really desperate for healing and seeking out all that healing. And it was exhausting. And I hear that from other women as well, that they're engaged in all these practices and they're like, when is it going to end? When am I going to just feel good? Why do I have to be in self growth and transformation and all of this all of the time? And I don't think you have to be there all of the time. I do think there is a graduation. For me, a lot of that came with plant medicine because the second book is about how I studied with indigenous healers to work with peyote and psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca and a lot of the plant medicines. And for me, That's really where I found like the most liberation. And I think everybody can find that healing. I believe it's possible. But for a long time, I didn't believe that it was possible. And I think that's where a lot of the suffering came in. It's because I was seeking and I was trying and I was doing everything and I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And that's really where it was so challenging because I was like, is this ever going to be better? Am I ever going to just feel content? I want contentment. And that was hard. That was really hard. And writing helped, but it wasn't easy. I like to be honest about this because I think that if people had been more honest with me, I wouldn't have felt like I was doing something wrong. I wouldn't have felt like, oh, it's only me. I'm failing at this. I'm failing at healing. I'm failing at contentment. I feel like in the honesty, it helps other women go, okay, let me take a breath
Mhm.
and give myself some grace and recognize that it's possible and I just need to take my time and I need to be kind to myself because I talk to so many women who are just so hard on
Yeah,
themselves. And then
absolutely.
when they hear how hard it was for me, they're like, it was hard for you? And I was like, yes, it was very hard. And they're like, oh, thank God, I'm not the only one who's struggling. And I think we feel relief when we know that other people are also struggling because we don't feel so alone
Yeah,
in our experience.
absolutely. Absolutely. How much of it would you say is a conscious choice
The suffering,
to step away from the concept of suffering and to step away from the concept that you can, or to just adopt the concept that you can start with processes and journeys where you can make that change? How much of it is
I
a choice?
I think you need to be taught that, right? I think you and I have had the gift and the privilege of finding teachers and finding teachings that teach us that there's a difference between our conscious and our unconscious mind. And I think not everyone has access to those teachings. Someone listening to this podcast now has access to that, right? They have access to the awareness that they have choice, that they have agency, that they can do things differently. I think you could go your whole life without recognizing that's an option.
Yeah, I would say right now, especially in the Western world, you would be living under a rock if you wouldn't have that at least read about it or heard about it or have a friend that has been doing it or whatever. But still, it is about, like you say, or like you said in the beginning, it is also about having the setting and the context where you were born, how you were raised, what you were taught, the examples you had, the role models you had. That's why it is so important. This is also what I say here in these podcasts, in these talk shows, but also in my work, that is that we are all role models. So basically what we are doing and what we are not doing has a tremendous impact on our environment, on our children, on our communities, our teams as professionals. Whatever we are doing, there are people looking at us. And so if we can make these leaps, these jumps, this transformation in a way that it seems at least human, not easy and probably terrible, but that it is possible, and where people can witness the results and the impact and the effect of that transformation. It's also an enormous, I would say, responsibility, although it's a very hard word to do so, because we have people that are learning from us. We are all teachers some way. Yeah. And this is also something that we are not aware of. We are aware, of course, as parents, for example, if we have children, yes, okay, we
Yes.
are role models for our children, but that's it. And I say, no, we are role models for a lot more people in our community. And we can impact a lot of people by creating this awareness for ourselves and creating a language around that, and having these conversations, because having these conversations as such are, that's awesome. I feel that so
Yeah.
inspiring and energizing to have this yeah, I see you, and in you I see me. It is
Yeah.
basically something that we all have. It's our humanity that is coming, and it's such a, we live in such an individualized world and in such a manipulated world in terms of presence, in terms of how we show up, in terms of what we do, what we eat, and things like that, that this authenticity and connection is a struggle for many people. It's like something they're not capable of anymore, because we always have to be on guard of what we say and how we say it, because there's so much appearances that we keep up, that we have to make sure we don't do or say anything that makes that
Disrupt.
mask a little bit more apparent, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Mm, beautiful. So, what would you say is, if you look at the impact you have from that transformation, you were talking about how it was for you, but if you look at the impact that you had on other people, what would you say is the main impact that you see and that you're proud of, that you consider as a success, as an ongoing success from your transformation?
Yeah, I feel really spoiled because I've been doing this work for my whole career. And the books just came out recently, but as a teacher of transformation for my whole career, I've had thousands and thousands of people that tell me thank you and you've changed my life. I have people that come back after 10 years and tell me I only was able to do this because of you. So I'm very spoiled in that way. It's the work that
Mm,
I've been doing for my whole career. And I agree with you that we have a lot more power than we realize to affect positive change in the people around us and in really surprising ways. I had some of the interactions, I didn't even have any idea that they were impactful. I didn't have any idea that people were looking at me in that way. I'm doing this because I saw you do it, or you inspire me to do something differently. But we are having that impact, good or bad, on people all of the time. If we don't speak up and we just continue to do things in the norm, people observe that. And when we are outspoken and we do things differently, people are observing that as well. I continue all of the time to get positive messages from people. And it's why I do the work that I do. I don't think I could ever do work that wasn't this. I don't think it's possible for me. I think it's just the work I'm meant to be doing,
isn't
you
that
know?
amazing? I have that same. If you're doing the work that you're meant to be doing, it's just crazy. I'm going to give you some statements in order to just see what your quick vision on that is, and they will be very familiar to you. And I just would love you to give, without thinking too much, just what you think of those statements. Embrace vulnerability as a source of power.
Embrace vulnerability as a source of power. Oh, what comes to mind is when I speak my truth, I'm a light to others, is what comes to mind. When I'm deeply honest, I give other people permission to be honest. And that vulnerability is an intimacy. It's a way for people to see into me and for me to see into them, which is what I think true connection is between people.
Beautiful. I like that. This one is the one that I absolutely love. Redefine success on your own terms.
Define success on your own terms. I think this goes back to our conversation about values. I think when you're in alignment with your values and you're in integrity with your values, success that comes from there becomes fulfillment. I think it becomes a less superficial success. It becomes a more fulfilling success because it's really meaningful to you and what you stand for.
Mm, beautiful. Your story is a legacy.
Hell yeah. Yes. Can I just say yes? I think everyone should write their story. And I think everyone should have at least one person witness their story. I think it's critical for you to have that experience of yourself and for you to say, I was here on the planet. I live. This is my life. I think your story is critical to that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Breaking silence breaks barriers.
Oh, hell yeah. One of the statements that I have in my first book is You're only as sick as your secrets, which I think is saying a similar thing. When the secrets come out, when the light comes into the darkness, is really when we have change, personal change, and collective change.
Whoa, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Hmm.
That's a deep one. I guess we can have a conversation about that for an hour, but we won't go do that. But this is something that that will land with me. Absolutely beautiful. Empowerment through rewriting your narrative.
Oh, yeah. we're storied beings. So my dissertation research was a narrative analysis of the life stories of women healers. So I had them tell me their life stories and I looked for themes across their life. And that narrative, we're narrative beings, we're storied beings. So we're always making meaning of everything that happens to us. And that meaning could be the world is safe, the world is unsafe, or everything works out for me or nothing works out for me. That story then becomes a physical reality. And so when we're changing those stories, we're actually changing our whole life.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Gabrielle, I can feel the way you speak and the way you present things. It comes so natural. It's like you breathe these concepts, these learnings. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing them with us here and for giving us the opportunity to really pick this gold and pick your brain. But it's not only your brain. I can feel that this comes from the heart and the soul, that this is something that is very lived intensively. And kudos to you for what you do and how you bring it, and how you bring it in a story that is very compelling and inspirational and energizing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just some last words of wisdom that you want to share with our audience before we close this session or this episode?
Yeah, I would say find one person that you can talk to about these things. Find one ally. We're better together. We're stronger together. Go on one retreat. Find one friend. Reach out to somebody. I think we're meant to come more into a collective consciousness and a collective healing going forward. So that would be my last words of wisdom.
And those are beautiful words of wisdom. For every conversation I have, I also look for quotes that you have put. And I'm sure that there's like a lot of very interesting and good quotes that I will absolutely also reproduce for everybody so they can just keep them somewhere in a place somewhere that they can watch regularly as little reminders for all this wisdom that you have been bringing here today. Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for being here, for being you, for being this amazing truth teller. And I can't wait to read your book. I will make sure also that all the information, contact information, but also how people can order your two books are here in the show notes below. Everybody that wants to dig deeper, that wants to connect with Gabriella, you will have all the information to do. And so thank you so much for being with us. Hope to see you again next week, and take care for now. Thank you again, Gabrielle. You rock.
Thank you. Thank you.